To multiply exponential expressions and simplify completely. Here's an example. Your expression on the left, you can simplify that before you multiply through by the exponent. If you choose to do that, it's doing it a different way, but you'll still get the same answer. In the left-hand expression, you have a 3 and a 4 that are going to stay where they're at, but you have x to the negative 2 and x to the negative 1. They will switch places and become x over x squared. Then you have a y and a y squared that stays the same. Go over to the other side. You have a 2 and a 3 that stay the same. Negative exponents on both x's, which means they trade places and the exponents become positive. You have a y to the negative 6th, which will join the y to the 2nd on the bottom. We still have not multiplied through by the negative exponents yet from outside the parentheses. We've only simplified inside. Now, moving on, you can have 3 over 4 stay where it's at. Everything's positive now inside, but you have x over x squared. X over x squared is simply x on the bottom. And y over y squared is y on the bottom. Still have not multiplied through by the exponent yet. On the right, the 2 and the 3 stay where they're at. You have an x on the top. X to the 4th over x to the 3rd leaves you with an x on the top. And on the bottom, y to the 2nd, y to the 6th is y to the 8th. Now over here, you're going to multiply through by your negative exponent, so you have 3 to the negative 2 that you have to write. And then on the bottom, 4 to the negative 2, and then x to the negative 2, y to the negative 2. On the right expression, you'll have 2 to the negative 1, x to the negative 1, over 3 to the negative 1, y to the negative 8. Now you have to go back and simplify again because you have more negative exponents. The left-hand expression, you have a 3 to the negative 2 on top. That means it's going to be a 9 on the bottom. 3 squared is 9. On the bottom, you have 4 to the negative 2. That becomes a 16 on the top. Also on the bottom, you have x to the negative 2nd, y to the negative 2nd. That becomes x squared, y squared on top. On the right-hand expression, you have 2 to the negative 1 on top. That becomes a 4 on the bottom. And then 3 to the negative 1 on the bottom becomes 3 on top. You have an x to the negative 1 on the top. That goes to the bottom and becomes x. And then y to the negative 8th on the bottom goes to the top and becomes y to the 8th. Yeah, that was a 2 to the negative 1, so that should just be 2 on the bottom. 2 to the negative 1. So we made that correction there. There's a 2 there. I couldn't see from that circle, so that I thought it was to the 2nd. But it's just a 2 to the negative 1, so it goes to the bottom and becomes 2. You have a 2 here that you can cancel with the 16 diagonally, and it becomes 8. And then from there, all you can do is multiply straight across. I'm going to have to switch to yellow so I can stay on the same page and just come up here. So if we have an 8 there, 8 times 3 is 24. You have an x to the 2nd, y to the 2nd, y to the 8th is y to the 10th. And then on the bottom, you're left with a 9 and an x. You can simplify x to the 2nd over x and just be left with an x on the top, a y to the 10th on the top, and 3 into 9 3 times, and into 24 8 times. So you would have an 8 on the top, a 3 on the bottom, and the final answer would be 8x y to the 10th over 3. start with the left-hand expression. You can keep the 5 and the 3. X to the second on the bottom stays, and the x to the negative 2 goes with it, becomes positive. Y to the sixth stays on top. Y to the negative 2 goes up there and becomes positive 2. Keep everything in parentheses to the negative 2 power. And then on the right side, 10 and 9 will stay where they're at. X stays on the bottom, but there's an x squared that goes with it. Y stays on the top, and there is a y to the fourth that goes with it. On the left-hand side, we can simplify. Y to the sixth, y to the second is y to the eighth, and on the bottom, x to the second is x to the fourth. And then on the right side, we will have 10 and 9 staying where they're at. Y and y to the fourth is y to the fifth. X and x to the second is x to the third. Small mistake here. We just have a y to the third to put in over top of this y to the fourth. And if that's the case, then this should be y to the fourth here. Alright, so that's back on track. Then over here, you're going to distribute the negative 2 power to this and have 5 to the negative second, y to the negative 16th over 3 to the negative 2, and then x to the negative 8th. Then you're going to have 10 to the negative 2, y to the negative 8th over 9 to the negative 2, x to the negative 6th. Go back and simplify. You'll have on the left-hand expression a 25 on the bottom and a 9 on the top. And this is a y here. Kind of looks like an x, but that's a y. The y to the negative 16th goes to the bottom, becomes positive, and the x to the negative 8th goes to the top, becomes positive. On the other expression, you have a 9 to the negative second on the bottom that goes to the top, becomes 81. And then you have a 10 to the negative second on the top that goes to the bottom and becomes 100. Now, x to the negative second, or x to the negative sixth on the bottom goes to the top, becomes positive, and y to the negative eighth goes to the bottom, becomes positive. Now, if you multiply all of this together, and we can do that here, 9 over 25, 81 over 100, none of that will reduce. So if you multiply those together, you're going to end up with a 729 on the top, and then on the bottom, a 2500. X to the 8th, x to the 6th is x to the 14th, and on the bottom, y to the 16th, y to the 8th is y to the 24th.